All right, thanks for joining me for another Building Public log. So in this episode, I want to talk a bit about what Nikki and I decided in terms of features for our product Goosly that we're building in public. Nikki and I sat down and went through a bunch of improvements and features to prioritize for the next couple of months. And here's how it went. So we currently have one of our engineers working part-time on Goosly. I mentioned in the prior episode, we have marketplace productivity apps which make us money right now. There are 5 apps for Jira, quite decently sized in terms of UI, business logic, and scope. And we have a total of 4 engineers to support across 5 Jira apps and Goosly. So it's safe to say time is scarce. For this reason, we planned for work for 2 months of a part-time engineer. We looked at prioritizing features that would fit best with the product's main value, planning in public, communicating, and keeping your audience in the loop with your plans. But we also took in scope some features to make sure that we improve the user experience with the tool. Some of these essential stuff is currently missing, like, for example, search functionality, better content editing, and also other bits. I'm also going to show you exciting features that are ready to roll out soon. So here's the plan breakdown. You can find this and explore it yourself by navigating to our public plan. Right, so on the top lane, swim lane here, you will see the build product, and we broke down into features. All of these activities here with the star emoji are features. The first one that we actually implemented, and I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to demo this in a second, is the column-based roadmaps, which is a piece of functionality that I think everyone will love. For example, not having to use time-based. I know that that's not for everyone. So this is almost done currently, and it's going to go into production soon. Currently, we're working on upgrading the text editor. Again, this text here underneath, I'll talk a bit more about and show you that sweet, cool editor in a second, but it was a bit clunky to manage this content area here when you're in edit mode, so we changed that completely. We'll see it in a second. After that, we're going to take care of rewarder groups and columns. So currently you cannot, the groups that you're creating, these swim lanes, how they're called, you can't reorder them. Next up, adding activity name when you double tapping. So currently if you double tap in edit mode, it will generate an activity, but then you have to click on it in order to change the name, because it just generates an activity with a random name like activity 1, 2, 3, and so on. Once this is implemented, you'll be able to double click to generate the activity, and then it will autofocus on the activity name so you can type directly, which means you can double click, create activity, type the name, then click again, create another one, type again, and just lay down your sketch for your plan super fast, which is awesome. Now for the activities, for the features that are more tailored towards the community bit, so we're going to create and add somewhere in the UI here a watch roadmap or end watch activity functionalities, which means that anyone that, if you have a public roadmap or even share just with your team, if the visitors click on watch roadmap, whenever you publish a new version of your roadmap, they're going to get notified that there are some changes that they need to check out, which again should keep your audience engaged. There are some issues with the daily view that we need to improve. I'm not going to go into that. Basically making days wider and activities thicker so you can see a bit chunkier items when you're on a daily view. And then also upvote and comment on activities. This is again a feature that's going to add to the community engagement value proposition that we're creating. Basically enabling your community to go into any of these activities on the timeline and upvote as well as comment, which should be pretty neat. So that's kind of the entire plan, all of the features that are coming in the next period. Now, let me show you the first 2 upcoming features that will give you the flexibility you need when planning and communicating with your audience and teams. First, we have added a new roadmap type, which is not time bound. So when you're creating a new roadmap, you will see this new pop-up. Let's go in and create a new roadmap. There you go. So it now asks you what kind of roadmap you're looking for to create. The timeline roadmap is what you got used to. It's the timeline roadmap basically that we started Goosly with. And now you have a board roadmap. So the timeline roadmap is to create plans and roadmaps based on time for daily, weekly, and so on. And the board roadmap, you can create roadmaps with custom workflow columns. It's perfect for projects that aren't necessarily time bound, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't use them as time. So I'll show you just now. So if I enable this, by the way, you can also have both. So you can have both, and your audience can switch between the two, and you can plan time and you can also plan columns, which is pretty neat. So for now, let's start this. By default, it comes with a predefined to do, in progress, and done, which again, you can use the columns as statuses, as workflows, but you don't necessarily need to. For example, I can create a column and say day 1, create another one, day 2, day 3. So, and now all of a sudden, rather than having, let's say 2022, Monday, 1st February, and so on, I can actually create templates, and I can see this being used if you're creating a specific template for product development or for startups, for anything specific, or for example, you're a fitness influencer and you're putting out a training program or a diet, a fitness program, whatever you want to do, you can do it here now with these predefined columns. If you're a startup or a software company, you can use them as sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. Basically anything goes. And again, you can also use them as transitional statuses, workflows, and so on, which is brilliant as well. Now, we also kept the groups, right? So I can create a group and it will still appear here, which is great, because it means you're not only using columns, you can also use rows. So you can use the previous groups, how we call them, as rows. And basically you have this grid dimension, grid board that you can use as your roadmap for absolutely anything you want. You can also have the switch between. So you can enable show timeline. Yeah, so now you can see those three pre-defined standard activities that come with whenever you're starting a roadmap. You can see them here, right, on the timeline, because they're pre-created. Now, if I go into the board view, I have the board view, and then I have the timeline view, so I can switch between them. And similar to the timeline, I can move these. So I can move this here. It's as simple as that. So you can switch. You can specify what you want your audience to see. Do you want them to see the timeline? Do you want them to see board? Do you want them to see both of them? Is completely up to you. Here's an example of how you would use this. This is another board, another plan that I created. And if I go to timeline, this is your regular timeline. Now I'm using the groups as people. So I have Amy, Derek, Sean, and Nikki here, and they all have dedicated activities that they're doing. So for example, Amy was gathering requirements, and then Derek's building the MVP, and so on. So you see, I have this time view, right? So everyone's working on what they estimated the time will be. But I can also go to board and I can see what each of them is working on and what are the statuses. Again, that's pretty neat because it allows me to switch between these two dimensions. And there's another cool feature, right? Apart from the fact that you have an entire grid here on the board, which allows you to have columns and rows, you can do this. How neat is that? Which means that I can have an activity span across multiple columns without a problem. And to be honest, coming from development background, it's not uncommon, for example, in this scenario, to have a activity, a task that's in progress, in development, let's say, because the engineer is building the thing, and also in testing because someone is testing it, right? So, it's not impossible to think of all of the potential possibilities of having this very flexible grid here. Right, so given that we have more configuration elements on this side panel here, we decided to move the content editor where it belongs and makes more sense, basically, which is under the roadmap. Yeah, as you know, in the view mode, the written content, the context, how I call it, is here under the roadmap. In the past, we had the editor here on the side, but we decided to move it on the left. We're also completely replacing this clunky editing experience with a seamless inline content builder with better content components and also a cleaner formatting. So let me show you. For example, now you can see that I can highlight all of these rows. So for example, I can go here and hit enter, and I have this plus item here, which allows me to select any type of widgets that I would want, any type of content. So for example, I can add an image, right? So that loads the image over there. I can put the tagline here, and again, it's all inline, and I can highlight something and change it. I can also convert this section to something else like quotes and so on. So it's a lot more of a seamless experience than before. For example, I could add a checklist, right? 3 and some. Yeah, so that's a checklist. I can check items here the way I want them. And I can continue to create whatever type of content I want. I can add a table. The tables in this view are a lot easier to use and also more flexible, nicer to look at, and so on. So this is the new editing experience that we implemented, which should make it a lot easier for anyone to work with it, right? And we're using something called editor.js. It's an open source library. It also comes with a lot of plugins, and we'll add more plugins into this to allow you to add a lot of content, as much content as you like. So, and once I'm done with creating my content here, I can just save and publish. And the benefit of it is also the fact that because we're using this seamless new editor now, everything loads exactly like you see it in the edit view. So you have your editing window there. When you hit save, you know exactly what to expect, because in the view mode, you get the exact same layout as when you are editing. And that's exactly what you see. You see the checklist here is marked exactly how I marked it in editing. The image is here, absolutely everything exactly how you would be interested in showing it. So yeah, these are two major upgrades meant to help make Goosly a lot more flexible for you and your teams and make the whole experience of drafting plans and writing comms as pleasant as possible. I guess that's it for this update. I'll see you in the next one.